Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Transcending Together podcast. It's me, your host, Alec John Bell, and I'm here today to talk to you about a really exciting topic that I have been super interested in the last couple of weeks. Well, actually, this kind of goes back a couple of months back a few months actually back into the end of 2021 when I read a different book about this topic, but which is actually somewhere on my shelf. Anyway, so today we are going to be talking about shamanism, which is really fascinating to me. It's something I never really knew much about. I think I had all of these preconceived ideas and thoughts about what shamanism actually was. And then I started reading about it and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. It's a lot different than I actually thought it was, but it's also a lot similar to what I thought it was in a lot of ways. So that's exciting. Today I have 3 books in front of me that have kind of influenced my journey about learning about shamanism. The first book that we have is A Little Bit of Shamanism by Anna Campos, which I'm not going to be talking about this book too much because I did read this book at the end of the summer of last year, I believe. It was quite a while ago. A few months ago, like 6 months ago. That's more than a few, I think. But yeah, it's been a while since I've read this book. But this was my first introduction to shamanism, and it was really interesting what I learned in this book. And I thought that what I learned in this book was going to translate to the other 2 books that I read, but each of the 3 books that I've read about shamanism have been tremendously different from each other, which is also very interesting because I thought there was going to be a lot of overlap, but there actually has not been a lot of overlap among the books that I've read about shamanism. There has only been a couple of things maybe that they talk about that are similar. So this is the first book. The second book that I ended up reading that I finished a few days ago was Shaman, Healer, Sage by Alberto Villoldo. Villaldo. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to say his last name. But I did read this book, and even though I did find parts of it interesting, I did find the writing kind of dry and not really completely enthralling. I wasn't completely sucked into this book, so it took me a few weeks to read. And I liked, like I said, I liked parts of it, and we're going to talk about some of the parts that I liked about in this podcast episode. But overall, this was not my favorite book of the 3 that I read. It definitely had some useful information, but like I said, the writing style was just not for me. And then the last book, which ended up being my favorite book, which I took a lot of notes on, is The Wisdom of the Shamans by Don Jose Ruiz, I think is how you say his name. And I'm probably going to sound really uneducated here, but I did notice something between Shaman, Healer, Sage and something about The Wisdom of the Shamans, which is that all of the shamans, their names start with Dawn. And I don't know if Dawn is a title. Is Dawn a title for their names? It was never specified in either one of these books whether or not that is the case, whether Dawn is like a title. They would just say Dawn so-and-so, Dawn so-and-so, Dawn so-and-so. And I picked up on it and I was like, is that a title, almost like Mr. or Sir or Doctor or something like that? So I'm not entirely sure. I think that's what it is, but again, I'm not entirely positive. I probably sound really uneducated right now, but again, I'm learning. That's the thing about this podcast, is that I don't try to come on here and pretend like I know everything. I come on here and try to share the information that I've learned with you all, and then if you all know anything, then you can share that information with me. And it's kind of like a what's the word that I'm looking for? It's like a mutual benefit thing. We all get something out of it. So if you know about the Dawn thing, the title of what that means, definitely let me know, because I'm curious. So anyway, I have notes on my phone, and normally I would have written the notes down, but I was reading. When I read books, I like to take notes on my phone instead of writing them down, because I feel like that is just a little bit easier for me to do. So, like, than writing everything down while I'm reading, it's easier for me to just pull up my phone and type something really quick. So all of these notes are on my phone. So if you see me looking at my phone, that's why. So shamanism. Why did I get into shamanism? Why am I learning about shamanism? Because if you know me, you know that I am a Christian witch. And if you don't know me, and this is your first time listening to my podcast, hello, welcome. My name is Alec John Bell, and I am a Christian witch. But something that I really like to try and do is learn new things and learn about different spiritual paths and apply some of those things to my spiritual practice. And I think shamanism is something that I really want to apply to my life. Certain parts of it anyway. So certain parts I don't really want to, but certain parts I do. And I think it's okay to do that. I think we live in a world where we always try to fit ourselves into a box. And we go, oh, if you're a Christian, you have to do things this way. If you're a witch, you have to do things this way. You can't be a Christian witch, because both of those things they cancel each other out. So you can't do those two things together. And I don't believe that to be true. I think that you're allowed to take things from other places and apply them to your life in a meaningful way. That's why I started this podcast, because I wanted to be able to talk about these things in a healthy, productive way. Because I feel like everybody just has too much of an opinion. Everybody's too opinionated. Like, everybody just thinks that they're right, and that they don't allow room for discussion or interpretation for anything else. And it's like, who do you think you are? Why do you think you're so right all the time? And it really pisses me off that I have people that don't really... I have people in my life that don't really seem to get a lot of the things that I do, and it can be hard sometimes trying to explain to these people, because I feel like they're just too opinionated, that they aren't open-minded enough. And I think that it's okay to stick to your beliefs and you know, hold your values close to you, and I think it's okay to... Somebody's knocking on my apartment door right now. Anyway, I think it's okay to take your values and your thoughts and things. Like, stick to what you believe in. That's a good thing to do, is to stick to what you believe in. But don't go around trying to act like everybody else needs to follow that. So anyway, that's just me going on my soapbox here for a second. I feel like, there's a lot of different things that I could say about this topic, but I just wanted to say that this is why I'm interested in shamanism, because I like to take things and apply them to my life, and I think it's okay that you can do that. So now that I've rambled on about that for 5 minutes, and we're 10 minutes into the podcast, let's jump right into the notes that I took. So the first thing that I wrote down is to discuss genetic imprints and generational curses. And this was something that was in Shaman Healer Sage that Alberto talked about in his book. Is that his name, Alberto? Yeah, Alberto. Yeah, that's something that he talked about in his book, which is genetic imprints and generational curses. He didn't really call them generational curses, I don't believe. He called them like imprints. And basically this is well, first of all, okay, let me backtrack here for a minute. What is shamanism? Shamanism is being awakened. And Don Jose Ruiz explained this in The Wisdom of the Shamans. And he said that, let's see what he says in his book. He says, linguistically, the word shaman would have meant nothing to the vast majority of native cultures outside those groups in Northeast Asia where the term likely originated. In my own tradition, the Toltec people of what is now Mexico, the shamans were called Naguals, which means the awakened ones in our native Nahuatl language. It's interesting to point out that the Nagual has an additional meaning. It is the word for life force energy, the divinity that we all have inside of us. Taken together, we can see that the Toltecs believe that everyone is a Nagual, but the shamans are the ones whose eyes are open to this realization. So basically, being a shaman is, being awakened. And Don Jose Ruiz talks about in The Wisdom of the Shamans that we're all living in this dream. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But let's go back to the genetic imprints. So imprints are basically this thing that trauma can give us. It's an imprint on our soul and on our spirit that kind of leaves a mark, and a lot of it does come from trauma. And he talks about, Alberto in his book talks about how these imprints can be passed on from generation to generation and can cause problems within the generations and can create just lots of messy different situations. And this is really interesting because my mother and I have actually talked about generational curses before, about things that have been passed down from generation to generation in a similar way. It's just that the shamans have looked at it in a different manner than my mother and I have, because my mother and I have been coming from a Christian perspective, whereas Alberto is coming from a shaman perspective. But we're both technically saying the same thing. And I thought that was really interesting. And of course, Alberto goes into his book and talks about how you're able to remove the imprints and things like that. And I won't get into that because that's a lot of technical stuff that I was not able to follow very well. But I just thought that was very interesting. So Yeah. The second thing that I thought was really interesting that Alberto talked about in his book is that the shamans don't believe in heaven or hell. And he said that the natives back in the day, when the Europeans came, they were confused by the concept of hell because the Europeans were trying to say that hell was underground. But the natives were confused because life comes from the ground. So they believe that life comes up from the ground. So they were like, hell is underground, but we come up from the ground. How does that make sense? So does that mean that we're, they were like confused. And I just thought that that was really, really interesting. The next thing that I thought was really interesting were the death rites. Now, let me tell you something here. If you don't know me personally, or you're not on any of my social media, then you don't know this. But I am scared of as hell of death. Like, scared shitless of death. Like, I literally, like, over the last 2 years, I used to be really, like, I used to always kind of want to die. And then now I'm just, like, terrified of it, like, horrified. The thought of death scares me so much. And so when I was learning in each of these books about death and kind of how they do things, I just thought it was really interesting. And so I almost called him Roberto. Alberto talks in his book about the death rites, and he talks about recapitulation and forgiveness. And recapitulation is basically, I don't know if I'm saying that word right, by the way, but recapitulation is basically you telling your story at the end of your life. So, like, when you're dying, you basically tell your loved ones your life story, and you go through all of the different things in your life, all the details of everything that you've been through. And you do this before you pass so that you can peacefully pass over. And that also goes into the forgiveness thing. This kind of comes, when he talks about how, when people are getting ready to die, they don't want to, they don't want to leave things open ended or not answered or not resolved is what I'm looking for. Not resolved. And so forgiveness is a big component of this happening. What are you doing? My cat is like sitting on the chair staring at me. So forgiveness is a big thing towards the end of somebody's life. Granting this person, telling this person, I forgive you for the things that you've done to me. The other thing is granting permission to die. So when somebody is dying, telling them that it is okay to die, letting them know that it is okay to pass on and that you won't be too hurt or that you'll be okay while they pass away. And that's a concept that's really hard for me. Because I think about, like, my mother. My mother and I are very close. And I think about the day that she's going to die. And which hopefully isn't going to be for a long time. But I think about it. And I wonder, when she's lying on her deathbed, am I going to have to tell her, it's okay to die, I'll be okay? Because I don't know if I would be okay. And I'm laughing right now, but it's really not funny. It's really kind of sad. And that's something that would be really difficult for me. And then he goes in to say that you would perform the final rites. And he talks about how the final rites are very similar to what a Catholic priest does. He talks about how you do the illumination process, and then you basically, after they pass, which the illumination process is like a whole thing that I won't get into, that he talks about in his book. If you're interested in it, read his book. It was too much for me to follow. But one of the things that he talks about is like clearing their chakras after they pass, or helping to clear their chakras after they pass, which I thought was really interesting. So now we're getting into Don Jose Ruiz's book. Again, I don't know if I'm saying any of these people's names right, and if I'm not, I apologize. I am a writer, but that doesn't mean that I am perfect at everything, so bear with me. So we're reading Jose's book, and so gosh, I gotta stop saying you guys are probably like, oh my god, Alec, you're gonna kill us with all of these ums. I'm working on it. It's only my third episode of this podcast. I'm trying to figure it out. So anyway, so something that Jose says that's really interesting is that we have no idea what we are. We just know that we are. And I thought that was so interesting, because I was like, yeah, that's so true. We really don't know what we are. We have no idea what we are. We just know that we're existing, and that we're just kind of going through life, you know, doing different things. Like for me, I know that I'm alive and I have 2 pets, and I'm sitting in this apartment, and I am recording this podcast right now. But do I actually know what I am and what like the whole purpose of all of this is? No. Some Christians would argue with me and tell me that that's not true, and tell me that we do know what we are, and that we do know what our purpose is, and whatever. But even though I'm a Christian, I don't know if I buy into that. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting point. So then Jose talks about how we're all dreaming, and that each person is experiencing 2 dreams, the personal dreams and the dream of the planet. So basically, there's 2 dreams. There's my dream, which is the personal dreams, who I am, my birthday, my name, my body, like who I am as an individual. And then there's the dream of the planet, which is the dream that all of us are collectively having, that all of our personal dreams are collectively having together, which makes up the trees, the earth, the water, like all the different things that make up our planet. Like, that's the dream of the planet. And he goes on to say that dreaming isn't necessarily a bad thing, that a lot of times people like to, you know, go on and say that dreaming is like this really horrible thing. But he says that, like, once we acknowledge that we're actually dreaming, we're able to live a better life. And I thought that was really fascinating. And he also talks about how Buddhism talks about dreaming as well, and how the Buddha sat under the tree for 40 days or whatever he did, and you know, he realized that he was dreaming too, that we're all dreaming. So again, those are some comparisons between Buddhism and Shamanism. So just a fun little fact that I thought was really interesting is that the Toltecs believe that we are in the 5th world age, meaning that the world has died 4 other times. So this is the 5th age that the world is living in. the Vedic tradition in India, which is on a different hemisphere, also believes that we're in the fifth world age. And these ideas happened long before we were going on, long before we had technology. And Don Jose talks about in his book that it's really interesting that two completely different places in the world have the same idea, which I thought was really fascinating. He goes on to talk about how humans have an attachment to suffering, which I think is definitely true. I mean, if you think about everything that we do in this world and everything that we live through, it's very clear that we have an attachment to suffering. Think about war and terrorist attacks and just violence in general. And he talks about how we, he was saying, which I thought was really interesting. He said, like, think about the people who watch soap operas or dramas, where horrible things are happening all the time. We crave that drama, that suffering. And it kind of made me think about slasher movies, like Scream or Halloween or even Saw. Saw is one of my favorite movie franchises ever. And it's horrible. It's awful. It's a horrible, awful thing. And, it kind of goes back to that attachment to suffering. We all have it, which I thought was really interesting. So he also talks about the parasite, which is a voice in your head that says you are not enough. So this voice in your head that you hear all the time that tells you that you're not enough, that you're not good enough, that you're a horrible person, that you deserve this, that you don't deserve that, all these other things, in shamanism, or at least in his shamanism tradition, they refer to it as the parasite. And then he also goes on to talk about how to use imagination and be creative with your life so things don't feel stagnant, and that we are conscious creators of our own life, which I definitely believe. I believe that we are creators of our own life. And I think sometimes we forget that. You don't have to be an artistic person to create your own life, damn it. You're allowed to do this. You're allowed to make your life whatever you want it to be, It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to let other people control your life, or let, whatever. Like, you have full control over your life, and you can make it whatever you want it to be. What is going on outside my window right now? Anyway, so in the Wisdom of the Shamans book, there were exercises, and there were exercises at the end of each chapter, and I actually ended up doing one of these exercises. So one of the exercises was to make a list of things it was a 2-part exercise. So make a list of things that you want to come true in your life right now, and then make a list of inspiration. So this was just a quick little thing that I did, and I wanted to share my responses with you, because I just thought it'd be fun. So the list of things that I want to come true in my life right now are that I want to start selling enough books to live off of. I've been an author since 2014, and I've been having a hard time making a living off of my writing, and it would be really nice if I could eventually at some point make a living off of my books. I just think that would be really nice. Another thing is that I want my podcast to take off. So, we're on episode 3 right now. I really have high hopes for this podcast. I would love to see where this goes eventually, and just I don't know, see what happens a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now. And then another thing is that I want to get my license back and get a car. So I had my license taken away a few years ago for, something ridiculous. Not ridiculous, like as in it shouldn't have been taken away. It should have been taken away, but I was a dumbass, and I deserve to get my license taken away. So I want my license back, and I'm gonna work on that and hopefully get a car. And then I also want to travel the world. I just want to go to different places and see different things and, do whatever. My kitty's here. Say hi, baby. Hi, baby. All right, you gotta go. You gotta go. I'm doing something. Whoops, didn't mean to throw you on the floor. All right, so the second part of the exercise was to make a list of inspiration. So these are not in any particular order. I kind of just wrote these as I thought of them. So list of inspiration. I said other books and reading. So I love reading. I love reading other books and things like that. I think it's great. Spirituality, such as meditation, tarot readings, yoga, journaling, taking a bath, working a spell, doing something like that. I love kind of things like that. Those always kind of give me inspiration. God is a big one for me. The divine energy, things like that. My family, of course, got to put them down. My pets, my fur babies, I love them so much. Music is a big one. I listen to music pretty much all day, like literally from the time that I wake up to the time that I go to bed, because I don't work. I'm at home and I go to school and I do my podcast and my books and stuff. But I pretty much listen to music from the time that I wake up to the time that I go to sleep. And yeah, I listen to music a lot. And then nature, which I am an earth sign. I'm a Virgo, so of course I would feel very connected to the earth. And then my friends. So, that was a nice little list. And that was a fun little exercise to do, just to kind of get your brain working. If you want to do that exercise too, I think it's a really great thing to do, just because, sometimes we forget the things that we're aiming for, or what our inspiration is. Gosh, I don't know why I'm yawning. All right, so next we have power objects, or totems. So these are sacred objects that a shaman forms a relationship which enables them to call upon whatever the object represents. So I thought this was really interesting, because I thought about, witches. Witches use a lot of tools too. Like I have an athame and a wand and things like that. So I'm like, oh, those are power tools as well. Which, are great. I love using my tools. I don't use my tools as much as I would like to use them, to be completely honest. But I would love to get into them more. I would love to use my tools more often and just figure out how to incorporate them into my practice, because I think part of the problem is that I don't really know how to use them in my practice, but I'm still learning, still learning. It's, spirituality is a lifelong process. It's not something that I think people just reach a certain point and then they're done and they're like, oh, look at me, I did it all. We're always constantly learning and evolving. And, I was a Christian for a long time, and then I started getting into witchcraft, about halfway through the year last year. So, it makes sense that I'm still learning. I've only been doing this for 6, 7, 8 months, not even a year yet. So get off my back. I'm just kidding. All right. So anyway, now that I just went on another little tangent. So animal totems are, important as well. They're basically animals that shamans can call upon, and you have the same kind of energy as like power tools or like totem, like physical totems as well. And something that Don Jose said in his book is that many Toltec shamans choose 3 animal totems at different points in their lives. So then he had another exercise in his book where we pick 3 animals that we feel connected to, that we feel like would be our totem animals. And I picked... He had a list of animals in the book, and it was a very short list. So 2 of the animals that I picked to be my 3 totem animals were not on the list, and I'll tell you why. The first one that I picked is an elephant, which is all about intelligence and wisdom. Elephants are my favorite animal, and this animal was not on his list, and I was pretty pissed. I was like, how is this animal not on your list? Like, elephants are amazing. I mean, his list was so short, he obviously couldn't put all the animals in the world, but it was like, come on now, elephants, like, they're such a big, like, regular animal. I was just so surprised. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I can't believe that you did not put elephants on your list. So that, elephants are just my favorite animal, and they're so smart, and they're so loving, and they mourn their dead, and they're such beautiful creatures, and I love them so much. So the second animal that I picked was a cat. This one was on his list, and he said that cats are independent and calculating. I'm very independent, and I'm very calculating. I like to do things on my own. I live on my own. I do my podcast on my own. I do my books on my own. I do everything on my own. I like being on my own. And I've always kind of felt a connection to cats, even though my first animal that I got by myself, like on my own when I was an adult, was a dog, which I still have him. But then the second animal that I got was a cat, and then she ended up having diabetes, and I had to give her up for adoption. But then I ended up getting this other cat that I have now, and he's perfect for me. So, a cat is my second. Oh, and this is really interesting. So I totally forgot about this. So in a little bit of Shamanism, the first book that I showed you, they talk about like the worlds, the middle world, the underworld, and then the higher world. Is that what they're called? Hold on. I can't remember what they're called, and I don't want to sound like a dumbass. The lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. So I did a meditation one day after reading this book, and I went to the lower world. I did a meditation on the app Insight Timer, and it was a beautiful meditation that I did. But in this meditation, when I went to the lower world, I actually had this gray cat come to me, and he was talking to me, and he was like leading me through this place, and it was as if I was there, and it felt like a real out of body experience, and it was a really interesting thing. But yeah, definitely cats are my second animal totem. And then the last one I picked is a Black Panther, and the Black Panther involves power. And the reason why I picked this animal is because when I was in middle school, I had a reading done, and I was told that my spirit animal is a Black Panther, and that's always stuck with me. So I did that. So those are my three totem animals. Let me know what your 3 totem animals are. I thought that it would be something where like you have to like do like a meditation or something, to figure out what your animals are. But he was just like, yeah, choose your animals. What do you feel the most drawn to? And I was like, okay, you're the shaman. I'll listen to you. So yeah. Anyway, so moving on to some of the stories. So throughout the book, he tells these stories, and these stories kind of lead to the points that he's trying to make. So one of the stories that I really liked is this story where he says a young man goes out and he sees these young men outside of a cave, and he decides that he wants to take the place of these young men. So he ends up going inside of this cave, and there's a demon inside this cave. And the demon says, "How dare you take these souls I feed upon into the sun? These souls are mine." And the young man tells the demon the souls do not belong to him. The demon asks the young man, "Who are you? You are weak. You are not worthy to challenge me." And then the young man steps forward, hugging the demon, and says, "I forgive you." That's a shortened, condensed version of the story that's in this book. If you want to read the whole story, definitely buy the book. But, I thought it was a really interesting story, but I didn't quite understand the point. But then he goes on to talk about how every time you use a memory of your past actions and inactions to hurt yourself, you are feeding the demon inside of you. The young man's actions in this story are especially powerful as he chose to love the demon or the parts of himself that he once felt guilty and ashamed of. I think that sometimes we all tend to feed our demons. And I've learned to stop. I've learned to stop feeding into my demons. And I mean this kind of literally and figuratively, because I do believe that demons are real, and I think that negative entities do exist that create problems in our lives, because I've witnessed them firsthand. And I just think that we need to treat ourselves better. We need to treat ourselves with kindness. And when we've done something wrong and we've done something that we feel guilty about, we need to be able to forgive ourselves and learn to just let things go. Not everything always has to be so serious, and we don't always have to weigh ourselves down either. And yeah, this story definitely resonated with me for sure. So then there was another story, and this story I really, really loved. I have to say, this story was probably my favorite story out of the whole book. So basically there was this young man, and he is, out on the town or whatever, and he comes across God, and God tells him that he's going to come by his home later that evening. And the young man's like, "Oh, okay, cool, that's great." The young man goes home. He's waiting for God to show up, and then a woman shows up at his door. A knock comes to his door, and when he opens the door, it's an old lady, and she's asking for a place to sleep. And the young man tells her, "No, I can't let you stay here. I'm waiting for somebody." So he makes her leave. He waits a little while longer, and then he gets another knock on the door. And this time it's an old beggar, and who's looking for food, an old man who's looking for food. And the young man tells the old man, "No, I don't have any food for you. I'm saving this food for my guest who's supposed to be coming later this evening." And he makes the old man leave. Another knock comes on the door a little while later, and there's kids outside, and they want to do crafts. And the young man says, "No, I can't do this with you. I'm waiting. I have a guest coming. I can't do this." And so the next day, he goes back out on the town, and he comes across God. And he says, "God, I was waiting for you. why didn't you show up? And God tells him, I did come, but you didn't recognize me. And I thought that was such a powerful story. And, Don Jose goes into, talking about the divine inside all of us and, whatever. I feel like it just really resonated with me because it kind of goes along with everything that I'm trying to do with this channel. How I believe that everybody has divinity inside of them. And I believe that we all have something to offer. And it just really hit me. It really did. That story really hit me, and I read that and I was like, wow, that makes so much sense to me. And I feel like sometimes we don't recognize the divine or God in other people. We don't see it because we're so focused on looking for it elsewhere. But it's inside of all of us. It's inside of me. It's inside of you. It's just, it was a really powerful story. And I was really, really happy that I read that. And I'm really happy that I read these books because they really mean something to me. But that's pretty much all I have to say on these books because I took a lot of notes and I took a lot of notes. And I really just wanted to get on here and talk about the things that I read and the things that I loved about these books and shamanism and how interesting it is and how much I got out of this. I highly recommend these 3 books. Shaman Healer Sage is kind of dry. It has a lot of really good information in it. But if you want to read it, then totally read it. But now I want to introduce a new kind of segment to the podcast, which I will be right back in 2 seconds because I totally forgot that I was going to do this. So I'll be right back. I totally forgot I was going to do this, but I want to start ending each podcast episode with a tarot reading. And this reading is going to be a group reading. So it's pretty much for anybody who reads this, anybody who listens to this podcast at any given time. So if you're listening to this podcast a year from the time that I uploaded it, then this tarot reading is still for you. Whatever you get from this reading is going to be for you. And I want to end each episode with a tarot reading because I just think that it's a really fun thing to do, but also a great way to end the show, if you know what I mean. So we're just probably going to pick one card. One card. Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay. So this is so funny considering we're talking about shamanism and we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. But the card that I pulled is Death. Death is a card that represents new beginnings and transformation and rebirth. And I think that's something that goes along with shamanism so perfectly. And I can't believe I pulled this card right now, because I feel like this really goes along with everything that shamanism is talking about. You know, in these books, in Shaman, Healer, Sage, and the Wisdom of the Shamans especially, you know, at the end of their books, they talk about death, and they talk about how death is a transformation, and it shouldn't be a scary thing. It should be something where we're going to the light, returning to the earth. You know, energy never dies, and we all will live on, you know, and whether you believe in a heaven or an afterlife or whatever you believe, you know, your soul will live on in some way, because energy doesn't die, and death is a transformative kind of thing. And I also don't think that this card doesn't this card doesn't always mean like physical death. I think that for people watching this podcast right now, I think that, you know, you're definitely going to be experiencing a lot of great things changing in your life, and a lot of things are going to be kind of making a 180. You know, things are going to be moving around, and it's all going to be for the better. But I can't believe I pulled this death card when we're talking about shamanism today. That's really freaky. I love when stuff like that happens. If you're watching this on Apple Podcasts, or if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, you can't see the card and you couldn't see me pull the card. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you did see me pull this card. I did not look at the deck. I pulled this card randomly. Yeah, so that is a great card to end this episode on. If you liked this episode and you're watching it on YouTube, please give this episode a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give this a review. Please give this podcast a review. You know, 5 stars, 4 stars. Even if you hate it, give it 1 star. You know, whatever. I don't care. But I would love to hear what everybody thinks. And if you're watching this on YouTube, there's going to be some links in the description. I have a Facebook group called Transcending Together that I'm trying to get to be a little bit more active this year. So if you're on Facebook and you want to be part of the Transcending Together Facebook group, then I'll have the link in the description of the YouTube video. But anyway, thank you all so much for spending nearly an hour with me today. It means so much to me. So I will see you all again real soon. Have a wonderful, lovely day. Blessed be everyone. Bye.